Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to Dream Career Talk Show. Today, we are having a very special episode, being the 99th episode of Dream Career Talk Show. And this is a special episode also because it's going to help a lot of people to start their own podcast. Right? We all know that podcasts have gained some great popularity in India, especially in the last few years. If you have been considering to starting your own podcast, then we have the ways to get started. In this episode, we are going to cover some of the key steps to launch and run your own podcast. And who else can be the better person to share the learnings and how you can get started than our own special guest that we have today, who is known as the king of podcast, Bijay Gautam. Bijay is the co-founder of WYN Studio, a creative content studio specializing in audio storytelling and podcast for brands. He hosts one of the top podcasts in India, The Inspiring Talk, reaching over 1 million people. He has been conferred with the prestigious Karmaveer Chakra Award and REX Karmaveer Global and featured India's Best Podcast Award. And Vijay, it's not only me. I think a lot of people have learned podcasting from you and been able to launch their podcast. So it's a privilege to have you here on Dream Career Talk Show. Welcome.
Thank you, Fatah. And I can see that it's 99th episode, and I know the time, efforts, and energy it takes in creating a podcast consistently, and you clearly are doing that. So kudos to you, and I'm so glad that I'm here.
Thank you for accepting and being here. And yes, podcasting is something that I dreamt long time back, but I did not knew. And I think for all of them who have been thinking, I think you have been a guiding light for them, right? But let's understand from your journey, how did you get started into podcasting? When did you realize that this is something that I want to get into? And how did this journey get started?
For me, it was more of me trying to scratch my own back. 2017, when I was working as a research scientist at a pharma company, I realized that this is not something that I wanted to do with my life. And when that realization happened, I asked myself that, hey, if you don't want to become a research scientist anymore, then what do you want to be? And the answer that came from within was, I don't know. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, where you don't like what you're doing and also you have no clue of what is the next thing that you want to do in your life, right? And I was at that spot, and I said, okay, but there are so many people out there who are doing interesting stuff in their life, the people who are writing books, or the people who are climbing mountains, or the people who are running big companies. And I said, these people seem to have figured out what they wanted to do in their life. So let me ask them, how did they figure out what they wanted to do in their life? And with that intention, I said, okay, let me just have conversation with these people and share it with the world. And that's how I started my podcasting journey. That's how I got started with the whole medium. And the more and more I kept doing this, the more conversations I was getting into, I realized that, hey, you know what? I'm really enjoying this. I think I have found the blueprint that I have been looking for. I would love to learn from these people and share their story with the world, because in those conversations, I was enjoying a lot. I was learning a lot from those conversations. It was helping me build the network, and also it was giving me the perspectives of life, business, career, and how they saw the entire thing. It was just blowing my mind. And I said, this is what I want to keep doing.
Great. That's really nice to know how you got started with this podcasting journey in 2017. And this was your journey of starting on your podcast. But when did you identify that, hey, I need to take this to the world and then help others also to get started with this? And how was the journey from the beginning on the coaching in terms of podcasting?
This was quite, I would say, something that came from people rather than me deciding that I want to share with people, right? So I was doing a podcast 1.5 years into it. I think it was mid of 2018. There were, I was part of a lot of, coaches, trainers, communities, and I was constantly talking about my podcast and sharing my show with them. And, I would often hear people reach out to me, saying that, hey, you do this podcast, we'd love to understand how we can create our own shows as well. And I used to help them in whatever possible way, right? I'll get on a phone call, direct them to some blogs or some resources and so on and so forth. And when I saw that more and more people were, asking me and finding the insights or the information that I was sharing with them, I thought, okay, let me try and create a 6 weeks long program. And on one Sunday, when I came back from office, yes, I had to go to the office on that particular Sunday, and I felt that, hey, you know what, what's this life that I'm living where I don't even have a Sunday, for me, where I'm still going to a job and I'm working really hard, and and I'm not making as enough, as much as I should really be. With that, I just drafted a WhatsApp message and circulated on those groups saying that, hey, in 1.5 months from now, I'm gonna be creating 6 weeks long podcast coaching program. If you are interested in launching your podcast, then just get in touch with me. And to cut the long story short, I just wanted to start with 10 people. Within 24 hours, I had 10 signups. 10 people already paid the amount. I had their money in my bank account. Within 24 hours, I had no clue of what was going to be the curriculum, like what is it that I was going to teach. And the reason I said I'm going to start this course in 90 days from now was because I thought for 10 people to join this program, it's going to at least take a month or month and a half for me to convince those many people to pay me. But people paid, and it was sold out within 24 hours. And I thought, hey, I think this looks like an interesting space. I think people are willing to learn from my experience, and that's how I rolled out my first ever coaching program. And then I did quite a few of those. So that's how my whole podcast coaching kind of thing opened up.
Great. And I think that's a great example of how someone, when they add value to the universe, right? Universe gives them back like 24 within 24 hours without you doing much marketing, like people joining immediately and then signing up. Right. I think that's a good start that you had. And now a lot of people want to start, right? But again, like they are seeing the buzz around podcasting, but they're not even sure how to get started or how podcasting can help them. So, can you help us, like, if somebody has to get started, like, what are the various reasons or how podcasting is going to help them if they want to do that?
And I think that's a really interesting question, because one of the very important things that I want people to have clarity of, if anybody is looking at starting a podcast, is just have a clarity of why do you want to start a podcast in the first place. Because when you know your objective or reason on why you want to start a podcast, you are likely to really go beyond 10 episodes. Because the reason I said 10 episodes is because usually only 10% of the people go beyond 10 episode and be consistent with their show. Now, this is the global number, right? There was this report that came out in 2021 that said there were 2 million podcasts globally, and only out of those 2 million, some 700,000 odd podcasts released more than 10 episodes. And if you asked, and also, there is another report that comes on a almost every monthly basis. So last month, I think there were some 200,000 podcasts globally releasing episode on in that month. So there were 200,000 episodes released in that week, sorry, not month, which means more or less there are just like 10% people who are consistently doing it, which means it's easy for anyone to start a podcast, but very few people are being consistent. Now to your question, what are some of the reasons why should I start my podcast? I think you need to first know what is the outcome or the objective that you want to achieve from your podcast. If you are a trainer, coach, consultant, or an entrepreneur, and if you're looking at reaching out to more potential customers and clients, and you want to use podcast as a medium to to kind of podcast as a medium to kind of connect with more and more people, reach out to potential customers, and open the door of network, because podcasting allows you to really create a great network, right? So if you want to do that, then what you can do is you can invite really cool people as guests on your podcast, and after that you build network with them, and eventually you can look at networking with them or converting them into clients. Or if you're somebody who's looking at reaching out to more and more people with your work and want to use podcast as a medium to really build your personal brand, then that could be your objective on why you want to start a podcast. Or if you are somebody who's looking at moving from industry A to industry B, but you don't know a lot of people in industry B, and you want to use podcast as a way for you to learn more about that industry by inviting those or having conversation with experts from those industries, and really shorten the time that you will take to build your expertise, then that can be another reason on why you want to start a podcast. Fourth, if you think that, hey, you know what, I'm too shy to have conversations with people, I'm too shy to put myself out there, or I'm not too confident with my communication skills, then then you can probably get into podcasting, because the only way you can get better in having conversations, or or building communication skill, podcasting can be a great medium. And like, I'm a great example for that, because when I started my podcast, I would quite literally write down 10 questions, and I read question number one, the guest would answer, I'll read question number two, guest would answer, and that's how I did my interview today. I can quite literally walk into the room and just get into conversation and do decently good job at that. Now, I don't think that would have ever been possible if I didn't do that first episode, or second and third, and so on and so forth. So I love this quote, which goes like, you can't get better at something. So if you want to get better at something, then you want to better, you want to really get started with it. So I think those would be few reasons on why you really want to get into podcasting.
Great. Thank you for sharing those reasons. And the statistics you shared, I'm very happy today because I am not among those ones who I'm actually among those 10% who have been able to be
Yeah,
consistent. So I have to give a pat on my back. Right? So thank you for
absolutely, absolutely.
right. That's great. But Vijay, as you said, right, the 10 episodes after that people stop. Right? But one of the reasons there is like a lot of self doubt creeps in, right? I'm sure
Hmm.
you also would have had this, right? Hey, when I'm speaking, I'm not good at it, right? And my communication sucks. I don't know if I can actually do it. And people are laughing at me. Maybe people are making fun of me, and people get stopped there, right? So how do you handle this, and how do you like keep continuing and be consistent, like you have been able to be consistent and you have created so many followers out there?
I think for anybody who think that you are alone in feeling that you are not good enough, that you really suck at things, and people will laugh at you, then that's not true. Every single person that I've had on my podcast had some sort of insecurities, had some sort of fear, had some level of self doubt about whether they will be able to do it or not, and also have some level of imposter, which is like, what if people will see me as somebody who just, faking it? So the only difference that I have realized between the people who really make things happen and who don't are these people. What they did, Fatah, was like, despite those voices, despite those thoughts, despite having those doubts on themselves, they went ahead and took that action. So, and when they took action, that voice that voice by itself, by the act of you taking action, you have kind of silenced that voice to a certain extent, number one. And number two, because you took an action, you really started getting better at that art. I shared my example, right? So if I never went through that phase of feeling that I really suck at interviews, if I never, if I decided not to get into conversation, while I have no clue of how one gets into conversation and how one asks follow-up question in conversation, I don't think I would have ever been I would have ever been able to improve on that skill. So I think when you really go past that phase of dealing with it, and that's an ongoing consistent journey, right? It's not that it's gonna stop after you have, let's say, released 5 episodes. It's gonna go, and then you will always be dealing with different kind of doubts about yourself. And I think it's about identifying those, being aware of those, and then still going ahead and doing it, still going ahead and putting that next episode out, still going ahead and putting that next blog out, or still going ahead and creating that next reel, while people will continue to laugh at you or make fun of you, or doubt you, or you may feel that your voice sucks, or you may feel that you are not a great communicator. People mocked me for the accent that I have. I made a lot of grammatical mistakes when I spoke. I made a lot of pronunciation mistakes when I did my show. And here I was saying that I want to do a podcast. Can you imagine a guy who has got this weird accent? His pronunciation sucks, and grammar. Let's not even talk about that. Saying that I'm going to do a podcast and have conversations with people, right? So that was me trying to face my challenge and say that, hey, you know what, I'm going to still go ahead and do it. And honestly, whatever number of years that I've been in podcasting so far, I see that is me doing the groundwork for something much bigger and better. And I see that I'm just getting started, because those many years I see is years which I took to overcome my flaws, overcome my set of challenges, which were unique to me, right? Not everyone would have those challenges. Somebody would have some different kind of challenges. So I think it's about that. It's about you, and you just gotta decide which voice do you want to listen to. The voice that says that, hey, I think you can make it happen. If people like Vijay or people like Fatah can go out there and talk to people and have conversations and do hundreds of episodes, then probably I can give it a shot. I think I'm fairly good at few things that they are not, and maybe I do have my own set of challenges. And it's okay to say that you have those set of challenges. And I've been always very honest and open about what are the things that I'm struggling with. And also the other thing that I realized was, people do not follow great voice, people follow great message. And if you think you have a great message to share with the world, how your voice sounds, how you talk, and Elon Musk is not the great communicator in the world. He's not a great public speaker, but everybody follow him, right? So because people love the message, people love the stuff that he's building and the vision that he shares. So I think it's about that. If you have a great message to share with the world, then the thought that I don't have ABC should not stop you from sharing that message with the world.
Wonderful there, and I loved the live example. And thank you for being vulnerable there, sharing about how you had those challenges, and then you still went ahead and took actions so that you could reach here. Right? And I loved what you said about you actually taking actions, and also it is not about the voice but the message, right? And
Yeah.
I think it's one message that people can take out there, that if you have a great message, then podcasting can be for you, right? Without looking at what kind of voice you have, how you actually speak, your accent and all, right? And now, Vijay, you speak good English here, right? But since we are in India, we know there are people come from various places, like especially they would have been like only speaking in vernacular language, right? Maybe
Mhm.
Hindi, maybe Kannada, maybe Tamil, right? Can they also get started with podcast, or English is the only medium and that is how they have to be there?
I think, in fact, last year and even this year in 2023, we have started seeing the, rising stars in podcasting in regional language space. And the next big podcasting stars are going to come from the local languages. And oftentimes people say that, but BJ, don't you think if I go to local languages, if I do podcast in Marathi, Telugu, Tamil, and whatnot, don't you think I'll actually be limiting my audience? And I often say that, what are we even talking about? Every single state of this country is a country of its own, right? When anybody says that, hey, you know what, that I'm gonna do a regional language podcast, I would say just go ahead and do it, because number one, there's a lot of people who are on the regional language space, there are not a lot of really great quality content. When I say great quality, I'm talking both about production quality and also the content quality, right? So that is, if you can solve for those two things by saying that I'm going to create a great quality content, great quality content and also great production value, so then you are likely to really thrive. And like, just to give you a perspective, there are 60 million people who speak Bangla, and if you just reach out to 2% of that audience, you have an audience of a million right there. And by the way, that is much easier than reaching out to a million English or speaking audience. Why? Because there are more than 100 countries in the world where people can create content in English, but but your competition is extremely low if you create a great value content in any of the regional language spaces. So I think I'll say, again, language is not a barrier. If you create, you have seen what the kind of followers people who are creating in regional language on YouTube are getting the kind of traction, right? And that's a testimony of what that's going to look like if people create podcasts in regional languages.
Yeah, I think that's a good message out there for people who want to get started but have thought of language as a barrier and not got started. I think that's a good message for them. And Bijay, one big challenge that comes in place is when we want to start podcasts, especially like interviewing, right? People like you have known people, right? You know influencers, you can bring in people, people will come to you on your podcast. But somebody getting started, right? Why would people come on their podcast? And that's one thought process that stops them. Okay, hey, people will not come to my podcast, right? So how would I start interviewing people? Without people, how do I do this?
Um, and that's exactly the question that one should be asking themselves. There are hundreds of people reaching out to these people. Why should somebody come on my podcast? Before I come to that, you said that, I know people and, I have a network and stuff like that. But when I started with zero. I knew nobody. The only people that I knew were the people, from the organization that I worked for, and which obviously, I was from pharma background, but that was absolutely not relevant for the show that I was doing, which means I had to build that network. Now, number one is, how do you build network? You build network by going to events, joining different groups on Facebook, Instagram, sorry, not on Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp, or Telegram, or Discord, and Slack, and where not, right? So you just go and join the communities and be somebody who provides value to everybody, who's there, seen, who's engaging there, so that people can recognize who you are. So that's what I did. I was part of a lot of WhatsApp groups. I was on Facebook groups talking to people, and that's how I started building my network. That's one. Now, somebody's like, hey, why would somebody come on my podcast? And that's the question that you should answer yourself. Now, let's do a quick exercise, Fatah, and I want you to play along. So let's say you want to get somebody who has got a million followers on Instagram. Okay. And when that person posts something on their Instagram, or maybe you want to reach out to somebody who has got 70,000 followers on LinkedIn. Now, when that person makes a post, take a guess. What percent of people will double tap and like that post? Let's say if the person has got 1 million followers, how many people do you think are going to double tap and like that post?
That would be like less than 1%, I would say.
So that would be what, 10,000? Yeah.
Right.
Or okay, let's say 10,000. Okay, out of a million people, 10,000 people double tapped and liked it, right? Okay, how many people will actually leave a comment on that?
Okay.
Just give a
Again, like
number.
maybe 10% out of them, right? Or
Yeah,
less than that.
so out of 10,000, 10%, that is 1,000 odd comments, right? So now, out of those 1,000 people who have commented, if you were to remove great post, I love it, or just emojis and stuff like that, if you filter those out and say that at least somebody who have left a comment more than one sentence, or at least a sentence long, or more long of a comment, how many of those 1,000 people would actually do that?
Rarely anybody, right? Hardly anybody.
100, 150, 200 people, right?
Right. Right.
Great. Like, let's say there are 100 people who just left, a thoughtful comment there, right? Now, out of those 100, how many would have actually gone to DM of the person and said that, hey, I just read the post that you shared about finding a great career. It really resonated with me because at one point when I was trying to figure my own career out, this happened, and your post really resonated with me. Thank you for sharing what you shared. How many of those 100 people will do that?
I think like less than 1% again, because people do not even think on those
Barely.
lines.
There you go, right? So barely 3 4 people. Now think about this for a minute. Out of 10 lakh people who follow that person, not even 10 people are sending a message to that person saying that why they resonated, not asking anything, not promoting anything, just appreciating the person for what the person is doing in a genuine way. It's not just faking it, or it's just saying that why I resonated with your post, and here's my story. Thank you for sharing it. Keep doing what you are doing. I'm following you. Now, when you do this once, twice, thrice, or 4 times, now don't you think that person is going to notice? Now, don't you think that, hey, you know what, this guy, Fatah, every single time I make a post, shares a meaningful thing and consistently, DMs me saying why he resonates with it and why he appreciates me so much. Now, when you do that, don't you think that person is going to get curious and click on your profile and have already seen what you do and your work and have some sense of idea on who you are? Now, ask
Yes.
yourself, when you make a post, do you not know the people who regularly engage with your post? Do you not know them
Yes.
by the name? Do you not know them what they all do because you have stalked their profile?
Right.
Now, what stops you from doing the same? Now, when you do that a bunch of times, now let's say you have done once, twice, thrice, fourth. Now, sixth time, the person is going to come back and say that, hey, thanks. That's it. Nothing else, right? Hey, thanks. Really appreciate it, right? Now, what that happens is when that person wrote, hey, thanks, really appreciate it, or maybe double tapped your, post, and you kept on doing that, what is happening there? That the person just opened the door of communication with you. Now, when you shoot an email or when you shoot a DM saying that, hey, really love your content on Instagram, I do this podcast, da, 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 I would love for you to consider being guest on my podcast. Don't you think the likelihood, I'm not saying 100% it works, nothing works 100%, right? You need to figure out your one way, but don't you think the likelihood of the person saying yes, I would love to be on a podcast or on your online show or whatever, don't you think you have increased chance by at least 80 90% when there are thousands, like at least hundreds of people who are sending said, hey, I love your content, I want to be on it, I want you to be on my podcast, versus, hey, I love your content, I engaged with your content, I've added so much value by maybe sharing it, maybe liking it, commenting it, going on DM and letting you know, and how it has really impacted. And after that, then you have made that ask. So I think it's about give, give, give before you can ask. And that's why I say that ask yourself, why should that person come on my podcast? What is it that I have done for that person that will make that person want to come on my podcast?
Definitely. I think that was some great value there, and people got some good approach also how they can follow things rather than thinking, hey, why would somebody come on my podcast? Right. And now the other challenge with people who actually end up like with the first 10 episodes or don't continue is also because people don't follow them, right? There are no audience, right? Hey, nobody is listening to me, right? Why should I continue? It does not really seem like it's working, right? People stop at that stage, right? So how you look at it, and you have trained so many people on podcasting, right? What is that formula that has worked for them, and or how did they become successful, like so many students of yours doing hundreds of episodes out there, right, and getting success in this podcasting world?
So I think when it comes to finding the audience, the one thing that, again, the question that you want to ask is, why would somebody listen to my podcast versus anyone else's show? Because it is very important for you to create something which people want to listen, and what is the unique value that you are bringing for your audience? That's the first thing that you need to figure out. And I think one of the simple yet very tough question to ask yourself is, if this was not my show, will I listen to this podcast? And I think that question as simple as it may sound, but when you actually sit down to answer that question, it's not going to be as easy. And the challenge is for a lot of people today, the answer is I don't think so, or maybe no. Then, if you yourself think that you don't want to listen to your podcast, then why would anybody listen to your show? Now, if you said that no, I don't think, or on those lines, then ask yourself, what are the things that I really need to fix on my podcast? Why did I say that I don't want to listen to? Is it because the topics are boring? Is it because my guests are boring? If you do an interview based podcast, is it my approach is not what I would like to listen? Look at what are the things that you want to fix. Now, when you have identified, then work on those, improve on them, and again ask the same question. Ask, do this exercise till the time you reach the point where you say that, yes, I would love to listen to this podcast. So I think that is a really, really powerful question that you can ask. Once you have sorted that and said that, yes, 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 I would love to listen to this podcast. This is so good. Now, once you have done that, and also do that after you have listened to so many other podcasts in your domain. Don't do that just you are creating your podcast. And I read this um, you know recently, and I loved it, which was, you can't read the label when you are inside the bottle. What that means is we are oftentimes consumed so much by by what we are doing. We often forget to take a zoom out approach, get outside of the bottle and see what's happening in the world, or have a third person view on our own work. Pretty much like what meditation teaches us, right? Like, just have a third person look at your thoughts. Pretty much have a third person look at your own show. And for that, then you also look at other shows and you look at your own show. So that is the first thing, right? Once you have the reason I'm saying that, but Bijay, I asked you the question about growing the audience, what it has got to do with it. Unless you have a great show, people don't want to listen to it. So that's why fix that. Once you have fixed that, and once you have created a good show that you yourself want to listen to, and you have done that, then you start other then you start the promotional strategy around it, right? And there are so many strategies that you can play with. You can, if you do an interview based podcast, if you have done a good job in the first step, then your guests want to share your podcast. The reason your guests are, let me tell you the hard truth, the reason your guests are not sharing your episodes on their social media is because your show, or the conversation that you had with the guest was probably crap, because they didn't enjoy being on your show. So, or maybe you didn't ask the great questions. So that's why it goes back to the first point, right? Now, I might say that, hey, you know what? If you want to grow your show, ask your guests to promote it on their social media. And then, people will come back and say that, but BJ, I asked my guests, 10 out of 10 people I've interviewed, only 2 of them shared. And then now it goes back to the point that I said, that what was it that was lacking on your show? What was it that was missing on your show where people really didn't want to share it on their social media? If you have done a great job of being a great host, then they would have shared it, right? If you have, and then if not, then there's a problem, right? So then, that's one. And second, let's say, Spotify puts your podcast on the homepage banner and says that, hey, listen to this podcast, this is really great show. And let's say 1 million people clicks on your podcast and they come on the show. Then again, that might give you initial bump in the number. But if you haven't worked on the step number 1, which is to create a great show, then what's going to happen? After that, the number is going to go down, because everybody who came with the excitement to check your podcast out realize that it is not worth their time, and they're going to go ahead, right? And that's why, again, it goes back to the first thing as well. So I think, once you have worked on that, then whatever strategy that you work to promote your podcast will be more efficient for you, will really start working. Otherwise, no matter whatever strategy that I'm going to give you to get million people on your podcast, they're not going to stick around, because the show, you haven't worked on that first step that I shared.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that hard truth and giving that powerful question that people can ask, because I believe this can be the foundation for everyone, right? And once foundation is strong, I think, as you said, there are multiple things that you can do to promote your podcast and all. But I think this was amazing. And Vijay, like again, when somebody has to get started, right? Doesn't it require a lot of investment? You invest in studio lighting, right? Mic systems and all. So isn't it like a costly affair that not everybody can do, or how do you look at it?
If you want to just do audio only show, then pretty much you need a microphone, and you can record it from your bedroom. And technology makes it easy for anyone to become podcaster today. You can quite literally start with a decent microphone, and most of the people do already have some headphone or lapel mics and so on and so forth. So getting started is not a big thing, right? But being consistent and really continuously producing episode is. But if you also want to do a video, then you can get a webcam, pretty much like the way I'm speaking on the webcam right now. And I'm assuming that you are also using a webcam. So pretty much you need a webcam and a microphone, and boom, you are ready to go, right? I think that's pretty much it. You don't need lakhs of rupees to get started. And eventually you keep on scaling, you keep on upgrading your equipment, and there is no end to how big that you can want to go. Maybe you want to create a studio setup where you want to invite your guests over, and so on and so forth. So those are the things that you can do later on, but to get started, it's not that difficult. Uh, as difficult as people think it is.
Yeah, thank you. And how do I get started in terms of what topic or title? Like, in which field should I get started with podcast? Because there are so many podcasters who are already doing this, right? So that's one question that stops people. Hey, already people are doing it, and which topic should I get started with? Right. So how do
uh,
they get started here?
yeah. One of the biggest reasons, Fatah, I say that only 10 people are consistently doing the podcast is because one of the reasons of why 90% people dropped off in the way is the outside in, you know, outward uh, view instead of inward outside approach. What do I mean by that is oftentimes people see that, okay, let me see what are the industries that are doing well. Let me see what are the kind of podcast. Oh, there is Jay Shetty doing a great podcast. There is Ranbir Alabadia doing a great podcast. He just interviews people. Or Raj Shamani talk to entrepreneurs. Let me also do entrepreneurs because it is working for him. It's going to work for me as well. That is a outside in approach. I'm looking at like what is working, and I'm gonna just start it because it's working for them without asking, am I interested in doing this? Is this something that I really want to do? And what happens? You go ahead and pick that idea, you work on it, and then by seventh episode you realize, oh damn, I'm not as excited to do this podcast anymore. People don't care about the show that I'm creating. Let's just stop it. And you stop doing it. What if you took a, now tell me something. Why, are you doing your podcast like you are at 99 episode, right? And now if you were starting a podcast other than the career, okay, let's say you were doing a podcast on food, which is, by the way, working really well, right? Or maybe a podcast on travel, or maybe a podcast on anything other than career. Do you think you would have had the same drive that you have to do a podcast on career?
No, definitely not. Because
And
I think, as you rightly.
that's exactly how one should be looking at inside out approach. Now for you, it doesn't matter if there are so many people listening on one episode, or if there is a dip in the other. The only thing that matters is, as long as I'm getting to talk about careers and introduce those career to my audience, I'm happy because I'm learning, and at the same time I'm able to add value to my audience, right? And that drive only comes when it is an inside out approach on what I'm really passionate about, what are the things that I want to talk about, and then match that with what people want and how it needs to be presented. So instead of outside in approach, look at inside out approach. That will take people really long way. And I think that's how one should really be thinking of when they're thinking of the podcast idea.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful message, and sharing that example also definitely helps to people. It's not about what is running well; it's about what you are passionate about. I think that really makes a lot of sense for people out there. And Vijay, you and me are coaches. A lot of coaches out there doing podcast and all. But what about corporate professionals? Like, I work with a lot of corporate professionals, mid-career leaders, right? They are passionate about certain technology, especially in the IT space and all. But do you think they should get started with podcast? Does it make sense for them, or is it only for coaches like me and you? who can actually create our
It
influence?
is for anybody who wants to build their personal brand, who wants to learn, who wants to network, who wants to grow. Because podcasting allows you to do those things, right? Now, if you're somebody who is in your corporate journey, then maybe there are people in industry from whom you would like to learn, from whom you would like to network. Or maybe even as a corporate, you are looking at moving from industry A to industry B, and you want to build network on industry B, or maybe understand more about industry B before you make that jump so that you can make an informed switch from A to B. And the quickest way to build network in other industry is by starting a podcast. Now, what that is allowing you, if you think about it, let's say if there is somebody who is right now in certain industry and is not happy with what they are doing and they want to move to another industry. Now, every single week, if you do a podcast, you are getting an opportunity to directly learn from best in that industry and ask them every question that you have about that industry. Now, in 6 months' time, you would have had a conversation with 25 experts in that new industry that you have no clue of. Now, imagine the amount of information and knowledge that you're going to gain in those 25 hours in the next 6 months just by having the conversation with people. Now look what you are doing in this conversation right now, right? I'm pretty much condensing a lot of learnings that I've had in my 6 years of podcasting journey in this 1 hour. When you're asking the question, I'm trying to condense everything that I have learned and give it in this 1 hour long conversation. Now imagine, if somebody looking to move to a completely new industry, if you did that with 25 people in the next 6 months, imagine the level of awareness, imagine the level of exposure, and also the network that you have built in that industry, or even in the same industry that you are in right now. Go and talk to the people in your domain who are doing next level things. Now, identify how the thought leaders in your domain are thinking. That is going to help you upscale, that is going to help you upgrade, right? And of course, it's also going to help you add more value to what you are doing, because you are learning the things that's happening around the world by talking to experts. So I think it's such a great medium for you to grow and like get what's happening in the world, build network, and really really increase your own value in the organization that you are in right now, or if you want to move to make that transition.
Super. I love the way you explained it and how it is actually helping people, especially the corporate professionals as well. But one, again, challenge that comes in the place of this one is, Vijay, like, I'm not an industry expert already. Like, would I look like a fool? Would people make fun of me when I'm talking about maybe like I want to transition into, say, artificial intelligence, machine learning, a lot of technology things that are happening, but I don't have any knowledge. So how do I interview people, and would people laugh at me, make fun of me? So how do I take care of this particular thought process that goes in?
Yep. So for those people out there, and I think that's a very valid reason, a lot of people think that, okay, here's the thing. When I started my podcast, I was not an expert in personal transformation. I'm a student of personal transformation, right? While I'm not, while I'm not an expert in personal transformation, but I'm student of personal transformation. I am interested in learning the ideas of personal transformation. So on this podcast, and even today on the Inspiring Talk, and I have recently released a new trailer, and the first thing that I say on that trailer is I'm not an expert. I'm not here to give you any gyan. Just like you, I'm a student who is looking at learning about personal transformation, and I'm looking at transforming my own life, career, and business. And while I'm doing this, I want you to be a fly on the wall and just listen to this conversation, so that the question that I'm asking to figure out my life is going to probably help you figure your life out, right? Now, in this journey, I'm learning so much, and it's helping me really, grow in this. Now, for somebody, let's say, who has been being who's been accountant, for so long, or maybe in digital marketing, and now wants to get into AI, or let's say, things in the Web3 and so on and so forth. Now, the simple formula that you're going to use is called LSS: learn, simplify, and share. Learn, simplify, and share. learn, simplify, and share. When you use this formula of learn, simplify, and share, what you are doing is you are learning, you are simplifying, and you are sharing to your audience. Now, when you are consistently doing this, right now you think you don't have an expertise in the topic, you are not an expert. In 3 months' time, you will realize your expertise has gone to the whole another level just because you decided to follow this formula of LSS.
Great formula there. LSS. I'm going to also follow that all the time. Learn, simplify, share. And when you are talking about Web3, I have a very good friend of mine who is watching us live as well, Alec. And he has two questions here. He also runs a podcast on Web3 as well, right? He's a technology guy. How can we scale up an existing podcast because he already has a podcast? And how do you monetize from a podcast? Two questions coming from him.
Yeah, I think when it comes to scaling the existing podcast, I already shared a bit there on how you really go about before you scale your podcast, like few questions that you need to ask. And then then there are different strategies that you can use. One is, of course, you can leverage your existing audience by asking them to share, listen, and and also consistently showing up on their feed by consistently sharing the repurposed content, whether that's a video bit or that's audiogram or whether that's story on your WhatsApp and so on and so forth. Just show it and be there in front of your audience. That's one. Second, if you do an interview based podcast, then ask your guests to promote it and share it on their social media. And if they are not sharing, then go back to what I shared earlier. Fix your show. And the third one could be a lot of collaborations, right? So if you do a Web3 podcast, then there are so many events that's happening around Web3, big, small, and so on and so forth. See if you can go and become the podcast partner there. And the way this works is you go and tell these guys that, hey, I do a podcast on Web3. I'm going to interview the speakers who are going to come on your event and promote your event on my podcast, but I want you guys to have me as a podcasting partner. Now, boom, there you go, right? So you reach out to 10 event organizations, maybe two will agree, and you all of a sudden expose your podcast to all the people who are going to come and attend the event, which is your target audience, right? And you can collaborate with other similar. Let's say if you do a podcast, but there is a YouTube channel on the similar topic, then find a way to collaborate with that person, bring that person as a guest on your podcast, and when that person goes and shares with his or her audience, you will get attraction. And also find the people who already has got a certain audience in the topic of your podcast. So whenever they go and talk about it, there's going to be a lot of rub off of the audience that's going to happen. And
Thank you.
when it comes to monetizing a podcast, which is the second question, I would say there are a few ways to monetize. Like one is sponsors. Now, um, the sponsorship becomes much easier when you have a podcast on a certain niche. When you do a podcast on Web3, that means the people who are listening to your podcast are dedicated listeners who have genuine interest in Web3. Not a random person will just go and listen to a podcast on Web3, right? For somebody to be listening to your podcast, even that somebody is just like 200 people or 170 people, but these are 170 dedicated people who love listening to content on Web3. Now, you can reach out to Web3 companies that would want to talk to that kind of people and say that, hey, I do this podcast, would you guys love to come on board and sponsor my podcast? Or you can, also do affiliates, right? Where you look at the Web3 tools or whatever industry that you are in, right? Look at the products that you use. And if you think that's going to add value to your audience, then share that with the affiliate link. The third way is offer your own product and services. Now, for example, for you, Fatah, you do this career podcast, then you are a career coach. The people who are listening to this podcast, if they want to get better in their career or find their dream career, then you already do have training, coaching, consulting programs. Then you can offer some of those things, right? Or maybe your book, you already have a book, right? So you can maybe ask people to check the book. So there are so many ways that you can actually monetize your podcast, and by first adding value to your audience and asking them, by the way, I have this, would you guys be interested in this?
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think Alec is also saying it's a fantastic idea and is going to implement this. I think you are bringing
Awesome.
so many years of experience into this and then adding so much value. I'm very happy that you are here and sharing your knowledge with a lot of our audience there out. Right. And thank you, Bijay. But Also, Vijay, when it comes to podcasting, like, is there any schedule that people have to follow, and how much should be the duration, and how regularly they should be doing it? Is it weekly, bi-weekly, monthly? How should they look at it?
Again, there is no right answer to that. Do it whatever works for you. But ideally, if you can do at least one episode a week, that would be great. Because when you do at least one episode a week, then then it's not too much and it's not too less either. But if you can't do one every week, start with two episodes a month and eventually get to one every week. When it comes to the length, I would say just don't bore your audience, and your length can be 5 minutes and it can be extremely boring and hence a very long podcast, or you could be doing 25-minute long podcast and still a very short podcast because it's so engaging and people want to listen more.
Great. And how do you look at the future of podcasting? Because there are so many podcasts happening today, and right now there is buzz, right? But do you see this actually growing if somebody wants to actually build a career in podcasting?
I think now, because it's like I said, it's easy for anyone to become podcaster. Buy two microphones, have two chairs, two microphones, two cameras, and boom, you are a podcaster. Which means anybody can become podcaster. But what we'll start seeing is just have just doing this is not gonna make cut through. Like in 2017, when I just did that, it worked, right? Because there were not so many people doing it. There were not many options. But now there are so many people jumping into it, it's not just going to make a cut. Now what you need to do is you need to now put that extra effort in creating a great show, and it can be a very very well tight show where you are giving immense value, or you create a narrative style podcast where there is a lot of value that you bring in on on your podcast, or you have some unique uh, you know um, show proposition, USP, unique show proposition. What is the unique thing that about your podcast that doesn't exist on the other shows that are out there in your domain? So there need to be something that differentiator, and something that is really fresh for your audience in the domain that you are operating in. I think those are the few things that you need to keep in mind. So if you do that, then you will continue to attract your new listeners consistently. Experiment with your formats, experiment with the kind of topics that you are doing, so that your audience can and constantly have conversation with audience and what they think about your show and what is it that they expect on your show. So those are the few things that I'll say you need to keep in mind. And the From the future perspective, we'll see that podcast is growing in India and it will continue to grow. And we'll also see a lot of original podcasts happening here in India. We'll see a lot of shows that are different than the regular conversation format. We'll start seeing that happen because more and more people want more tighter, crisper content. Long form will continue to work, but also people will want immense value in the less amount of time, and that is something that we'll see will really thrive.
Great. And Vijay, like in about 50 minutes or so, whatever we have spoken, you have shared so much of knowledge. Now, if people want to really know it in detail and learn from you, right, is there a channel where they can reach out to you? Or do you still train people? Because I was one of your students who got into this and learned from you about podcasting, and I'm happy like I'm here, 99th episode with you. So, how do people get connected if they have to start their podcasting?
I think I'll say, people can reach out to me on my Instagram. It's at the red Bijay Speaks, and that's where I'm most accessible and most active. So just, shoot me a DM on Instagram, and happy to help and serve in any possible way, because I genuinely believe that, podcast as a medium is really, really, it has come a long, long way, and it will continue to grow. And if you really think you have a message to share with the world, you shouldn't be really delaying that further. Just get into it and start sharing your voice with the world.
Great. And somebody who is getting started, it's fine to get started. But is there any next level also where you can help them if somebody is already doing their existing podcast, right? Like people had questions around monetization, taking it to the next level, making it big, right? So do you have any next level where you can actually help them scale as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely, can have a conversation around that. I'll say Instagram again is the place. Just, reach out to me on Instagram and we'll take it from there.
Great. I think it was definitely a very fruitful conversation here. And
I'm glad.
it is an honor to have you here on the episode of my podcast. Right. And thank you for being here. And that one message that you want to share before we actually conclude this episode with all the audience out there.
I think, anybody who is watching this or listening this, I'll say that, and this is something that I'm thinking a lot about lately, is that if you're a trainer or a coach or a consultant or somebody who runs a business and so on and so forth, and now you can see the things that's happening with AI and stuff like that, the people who have built a certain following of the audience, the people who have built the community, and the people who have built their sort of distribution, and distribution through content, will be able to sell better, will be able to thrive. And these are the companies that we'll see, we have already started seeing, are thriving. And if you think that, hey, you know what, I'm more knowledgeable than the person who's out there who don't even have 25% of my knowledge, and people see that person as an expert but nobody knows me. And we'll see more and more of that happening, because the person who just has got that 25% knowledge is simply learning, simplifying and sharing, and people think of that person as an expert, and nobody knows the person who is a real expert, because that person never shares anything out to the world. So we'll see more and more of that happen, because the more you share, more people will know what you know. And if you do not share what you already know, people will never know what you know. And if they don't know what you know, then they don't trust you yet, and they don't even know about you. Then why would they want to transact with you? So I think content is a great medium for you to reach out to those audience, and um, really have a really build that distribution that you need to sell anything. So I would say, just get started, and you can have that competitor edge. Your content can be that competitor edge for you. Either you are entrepreneur or coach or a trainer or a consultant and so on and so forth. So
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful concluding message. And thank you to you once again. And thank you to all those audiences who are watching us, because this can be a starter for many. And this can be something that can help scale their podcasting journey for many. So thank you once again, Bijay, for accepting the invite and being here and adding a lot of value to the audience.
thank you, Fatah. I am so proud that you are, at 99th episode, which is really amazing. Congratulations on all the amazing work that you've done on the podcast, and doing this for so many years. I know the amount of time, efforts, and energy it takes in producing every single episode of the show, and you have done 99 of those. So congratulations and all the best, and keep at it, and keep serving, people, and keep adding value and spreading the message.
Thank you. Thank you so much.